The desert sun was still rising over Palm Springs when my son asked me the question that shattered something inside of me forever. "Mom, did Grandma forget me?" His voice was soft. Too soft. The kind of soft that only happens when a child is trying to hold themselves together in front of a room that's already decided they don't matter. I blinked, once, twice, trying to process what he had just said. Around us, the living room was loud. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. Wrapping paper was flying like confetti. Each of Jackson's cousins had a white envelope in their hands, grinning from ear to ear. Inside those envelopes? Checks. Generous ones. $2,000 each. Just a little head start, Grandma Eloise had said earlier with a sweet smile and that polished, picture-perfect voice of hers, the kind that always sounded like she was hosting a lifestyle segment on TV. But there was no envelope for Jackson. And that's where the story begins. We had flown in 2 days before Christmas. It was a big deal. Eloise, the matriarch, the powerhouse, the family's unofficial queen, had invited all her children and grandchildren for one big holiday retreat in her new desert villa. The kind of place that looked like it was built for a magazine spread, infinity pool, floor-to-ceiling windows, artisan everything. To Eloise, appearances were everything. And for a long time, I played along. Smiled. Sent thank you notes. Hosted birthdays with coordinated themes. I tried to be the daughter-in-law she could brag about. I tried even harder after Jackson came into our lives. My husband Mark and I had been through the ringer, 5 years of fertility treatments, 3 miscarriages, endless questions from relatives with no boundaries and even less tact. And when we finally decided to adopt, we did so with our whole hearts. We met Jackson when he was 3. He was shy. His first smile came after 2 weeks of bedtime stories and dinosaur-shaped pancakes. The first time he called us Mom and Dad, we both cried so hard we scared him. But that moment changed everything. To us, he was our son in every way that mattered. To Eloise? He was something else. Something. Not blood. She never said it outright, not at first. At Jackson's first Christmas with the family, she bought him a board book. For a 4-year-old. He was 6. She smiled and said, "Oops, must have mixed up the ages." At Easter, all the cousins got elaborate baskets, full of personalized toys and high-end chocolate. Jackson got a chocolate bar and a sticker sheet. But we let it slide. Because we wanted to believe it wasn't what it looked like. We told ourselves she needed time. We told ourselves she came from a different generation, that maybe she just didn't know how to bond with a child she hadn't watched grow in the womb. We told ourselves a lot of things. Until that morning. Jackson had been buzzing for days. He packed his own little suitcase with his favorite button-down shirt and a pair of blue socks because they matched Grandma's living room. He made holiday cards for each of his cousins, decorated with hand-drawn snowmen and glitter stars. He even wrote one for Eloise. To Grandma E, thank you for inviting me. I hope we get to be friends. He signed it with a heart and a drawing of himself holding hands with her. He was so proud. I should have known. I should have known something was wrong when Eloise glanced at the card, smiled tight-lipped, and tucked it under a stack of magazines without reading it. But I pushed the feeling aside. Again. We all gathered in the great room that morning. Sunlight poured through the glass walls. Eloise wore a cream cashmere sweater and diamond earrings that caught the light just so. She stood beside the 12-foot Christmas tree, beaming. "This is the year of legacy," she said. "You kids are growing up. Starting lives. I want to help you get a step ahead." She handed out envelopes. One by one. All the grandchildren got one. All except Jackson. He sat there, watching. Not complaining. Not fidgeting. Just watching. I waited, thinking maybe it was a mistake. Maybe his was in a different pile. Maybe Eloise would smile and say, "And now for my newest grandson." She didn't. When the last envelope was given out, Jackson leaned toward me and whispered, "Maybe mine got lost in her room?" His voice cracked. I stood. "Eloise, was there one for Jackson?" She didn't miss a beat. Didn't flinch. She looked at me, then at him, and said, calmly, coolly, "He's not blood. It's for the biological grandchildren." Just like that. Silence fell. But not the kind of silence that comes from shock. It was the kind that comes from complicity. No one said anything. Not my brother-in-law. Not my niece who had just posted an Instagram story about family over everything. Not even my husband. Mark just stared, frozen. I saw his jaw working, grinding, his fists clenched at his sides. I looked at Jackson. His face didn't fall the way I expected. He didn't cry. He just got quiet. Too quiet. He folded his little hands in his lap and stared at the floor like he was trying to disappear into the rug. I knelt beside him, my throat tight. "You did nothing wrong," I whispered. He nodded, then said the words that will haunt me until the day I die. "It's okay, Mom. Maybe next year she'll think I'm family." That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an angry, screaming kind of way. Not yet. It was more like a cold, deep clarity. I looked around that perfect room, at all the perfect people with their perfect presence and polite smiles. And I realized something, keeping the peace in a room like that would cost my son a piece of himself. And I wasn't willing to pay that price anymore. I saw Mark move. Just slightly. He reached into his suitcase, which was tucked behind the sofa. Pulled out a manila envelope. I didn't know what was inside, but I knew whatever it wasn't nothing. He stood up slowly, met my eyes, and said, "I need to go talk to my mother." Mark didn't say a word. He stood, steady and still, like a tree in the middle of a hurricane, holding that manila envelope in one hand like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Around us, the room was still buzzing with holiday cheer, at least on the surface. The kids were too busy showing off their checks to notice the tension brewing. The adults? Oh, they noticed. They just didn't want to look at it too long. Because if they really looked, they'd have to feel it. Jackson sat beside me on the floor, still as a statue. He kept his eyes low, watching the patterns on the rug as if he were trying to memorize every loop and swirl. The glow from the Christmas tree reflected in his glasses, but not in his eyes. No one said his name. No one asked Eloise to explain. No one even reached out to put a hand on his shoulder, or offer an "I'm sorry," or even try to soften the moment. Instead, they moved on. Like nothing had happened. My brother-in-law Garrett cleared his throat and started talking about flights getting cancelled up north. My sister-in-law Claire forced a laugh and held up her envelope. "Guess Grandma's helping me finally start that bakery, ha," she chirped, too loud, too fast. Eloise smiled. The moment slid away. Or at least they thought it had. Mark didn't move. He didn't sit back down. He just stood there, watching his mother, who suddenly looked much older than she had an hour ago. The kind of old that isn't about wrinkles or gray hair, it's about someone being exposed in the cold light of truth. Still, he said nothing. I could see the war in his body. Rage threatening to boil. Pain threatening to swallow him. And under all of that, something deeper, disappointment. He had loved her once, so deeply. The kind of love only a son has for the woman who read him stories and packed his lunches and kissed his forehead every night for a decade. That love doesn't die easily. But it can be broken. "Maybe I'll go outside," Jackson whispered, tugging gently on my sleeve. I looked down. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded too quickly. "I just want to see if the cactus outside has birds in it." "You said sometimes they do." I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah. They might. Want me to come? He shook his head. No, it's okay. I want to be alone for a minute. And then he left the room. Still no one said anything. I stood slowly. My legs felt like stone. My voice came out low and tight. Did no one hear what she said? Garrett looked up, blinking. What do you mean? Eloise just told our son, your nephew, that he doesn't count. That he's not family. Claire shifted in her seat. I think maybe you're overreacting. I mean, she just meant. No, I snapped, and it came out harder than I intended. She meant exactly what she said. She looked a 9-year-old in the eye and told him he didn't belong. The silence stretched again. Claire looked down. Garrett picked up a glass of cider and pretended to sip. And Eloise? She sat back in her chair, one leg crossed elegantly over the other, completely unfazed. It's not personal, she said coolly. He's just not blood. That money is for my legacy. My real grandchildren. Mark moved then. He walked across the room, slowly, carefully, like he was walking a minefield. And when he reached his mother, he stopped. You know what hurts the most, he said, his voice calm. It's not the check. It's not even the words. It's the fact that you knew exactly what you were doing. Eloise opened her mouth, but he held up his hand. You looked at that boy, my son, and chose to make him feel small. On purpose. Her eyes narrowed. Don't be dramatic. Mark exhaled slowly, like he was holding back the explosion inside him. I used to think you were cold, he said. Now I think you're cruel. He turned to me. I'm taking a walk. He didn't wait for a response. Just left. The front door clicked shut behind him like the end of a chapter. I didn't follow. I sat there, frozen, with 20 pairs of eyes flicking toward me, then away again. My cheeks burned. My hands trembled. I wanted to scream. Cry. Flip that picture-perfect coffee table upside down and make them see what they were doing. But instead, I did what I'd done for years. I stayed quiet. And in that silence, I realized something that broke me wide open. They didn't forget Jackson. They chose to exclude him. And the room agreed. With their silence, with their awkward glances and quick subject changes, they voted. Not in words, but in something far more damaging. In action. After about 10 minutes, I found Jackson outside. He was sitting on the edge of the low wall that bordered the property, his legs swinging back and forth, staring out at the horizon where the mountains turned pink under the late afternoon sun. Hey, I said softly. He didn't look at me. I saw one bird, he said. A little brown one with a yellow belly. It flew away. I bet it'll come back, I said. Probably not, he whispered. We sat in silence for a few beats. Then he asked, was it because I didn't say thank you fast enough last year? I blinked. What? Grandma. Maybe I forgot to say thank you when she gave me that puzzle last year. Maybe that's why I didn't get one today. My heart cracked. No, sweetheart. That's not why. He finally looked at me, eyes big and heavy. Then why? I swallowed hard. Because sometimes, people don't understand what family really means. And that's not your fault. He nodded. But he didn't believe me. Not yet. That night, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, tense. The kind of quiet where the walls feel like they're holding their breath. Dinner was a performance. Eloise played the host, full of grace and cheer, as if the morning hadn't happened. She carved roast duck and passed around wine and asked Claire about her new yoga studio. Mark returned just before dessert. He didn't speak. Just kissed Jackson's head, sat down beside me, and squeezed my hand under the table. I felt something in that touch. Not comfort. Conviction. Back in our room, Jackson curled into bed without asking for a story. He held his stuffed dinosaur tight and faced the wall. I sat beside him, rubbing his back slowly, whispering that I loved him, that he was good, that none of this was his fault. I know, he mumbled. But it still feels like it is. When I turned around, Mark was standing by the closet, the manila envelope in his hand again. His shoulders were square. His face was unreadable. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He looked at me and said, "Something I should have done a long time ago." I had never seen Mark like that. Not when we lost the second pregnancy. Not when we signed Jackson's final adoption papers. Not even when his father died, and he had to give the eulogy holding back a decade of unspoken grief. This was different. This was the stillness of a man who had reached his limit, not in rage, but in resolve. The house was asleep. You could hear it in the soft hum of the heater, in the distant clink of dishes being washed downstairs by someone trying to avoid eye contact. You could feel it in the way the walls seemed thinner that night, like they were listening. Jackson had fallen into a restless sleep, his back to the door, still clutching his dinosaur. Mark stood across the room, that envelope in his hand like it was a weapon, but the kind that wounds with truth, not fury. "I started this 6 months ago," he said, his voice low. I turned slowly. "Started what?" He opened the envelope and handed me the contents. It wasn't thick. Just 3 sheets of paper. But it was everything. Page 1, an updated will. Page 2, legal trust designations. Page 3, a notarized declaration that Jackson was not just our son by heart, but in every legal capacity recognized by the state of California. We'd already finalized the adoption years ago, but Mark had taken it further. He'd rewritten our estate plan. Removed Eloise as executor. Named Jackson sole beneficiary of the house, insurance, and savings. Filed paperwork to ensure our son could never again be called not blood in a room full of cowards. I sat down slowly, eyes scanning the documents. The ink was fresh, but the intention was ancient. Protection. Legacy. Justice. "You did this, without telling me?" He nodded. I wanted to have it ready. Just in case. I stared at him, stunned. "You really thought it might come to this?" He exhaled. "No. I knew it would." Mark sat beside me on the bed. Neither of us said a word for a long time. Then he whispered, "I let her get away with too much for too long. Because it was easier. Because she's my mom. Because I thought eventually she'd see Jackson. Really see him." He shook his head. "But she doesn't. And she won't. Not unless someone makes her." That's when he stood. Got dressed, quiet, efficient. Put the envelope back in his coat pocket. "What are you going to do?" I asked. He looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm going to draw a line." He left just after midnight. Didn't slam the door. Didn't storm out. Just walked out into the cold desert night like a man who was done waiting for people to do the right thing on their own. I didn't follow. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at the crumpled wrapping paper still stuffed into a plastic bag beside Jackson's suitcase. I thought about the envelope Eloise didn't hand him. The card he'd drawn that she never read. The space she carved out of the room where his place should have been. And I cried. Not because of the money. Not even because of the insult. But because my little boy, the kindest soul I've ever met, had learned far too early that love can sometimes come with conditions. I don't know what Eloise expected when she heard the knock at her door after midnight. Maybe she thought Mark had come to yell. Maybe she thought he'd beg her to fix it before I left with Jackson. Maybe she thought he'd cave again. But she was wrong. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. He sat down at her pristine white kitchen table, pulled out the manila envelope, and slid it across the marble surface. "This is who Jackson is to me," he said. Eloise stared at the envelope. Didn't touch it. Mark leaned forward. "He's my son. On paper. On purpose. Forever." Still she said nothing. So he opened it for her. Page by page. He read each section aloud like it was scripture, his voice steady and unwavering. "You don't have to like it," he said. "But you do have to understand it. Because from this moment forward, this isn't a conversation anymore. It's a boundary." Eloise's face didn't change much. But her hands trembled. She reached for a glass of water but didn't drink. Mark kept going. "I'm not asking for an apology. I'm not asking you to suddenly become the grandmother of the year. I'm telling you, if you want to be in my life, you don't get to pretend Jackson is less than your other grandkids." Her mouth opened. He raised a hand. "I'm not finished." He told her about the bird story. About how Jackson had gone outside to look for a bird because it was easier than staying in a room full of adults who didn't fight for him. He told her how Jackson blamed himself. How he asked if maybe he didn't say thank you fast enough last year. That part hit her. "I know it did." Mark said she looked down at the table like it burned her. But he didn't let her off the hook. "You're not just the one who didn't include him," he said. "You're the one who taught a 9-year-old boy that being part of a family is conditional." Eloise finally spoke. Her voice was small. "I didn't mean for it to come across that way." "But it did," Mark said. "And you don't get to control how it felt." Then came the final blow. "If you want to be part of our future, you fix this. You fix you. Because if I have to choose between my son and my mother..." He paused. "I'll choose my son every time." Then he stood, left the envelope on the table, and walked out the same way he'd come in, quiet, firm, done. When he came back to the guest house, I was still awake. He didn't say anything. Just crawled into bed, pulled me close, and whispered, I meant every word. I held him tighter than I ever had before. And for the first time in years, I felt the ground under us shift into something stronger. Not just love, but alignment. Not just marriage, but unity. The morning after Mark's midnight visit to his mother, the desert was still. You could hear the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the strained kind. The kind that comes after someone breaks a pattern that was never meant to be questioned. It was 8:17 a.m. Jackson sat at the kitchen island of the guest house, stirring his hot cocoa in slow, quiet circles. He hadn't said much since the envelope-less Christmas. His little dinosaur pajamas were wrinkled. His eyes had bags under them that number 9-year-old should carry. Mark stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw tense. I watched them both from the sink, wondering what kind of apology, if any, could mend the kind of wound that was inflicted in full view of the people who were supposed to protect you. Then, a knock on the guest house door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. We all froze. Mark was the first to move. He opened the door without saying a word. There she was. Eloise. Her hair wasn't styled. No lipstick. No pearls. Just a gray cardigan, slippers, and a silver-wrapped box in her hands. It was medium-sized. No ribbon. She looked like someone who had aged 10 years overnight. Her voice was smaller, too. Can I come in? Mark didn't move. Didn't speak. I gave a slight nod behind him. She stepped inside. I watched as she tiptoed, across the threshold like she was entering sacred ground. Her eyes went straight to Jackson. He didn't say anything. Just kept stirring his cocoa. I forgot this yesterday, she said, gently placing the box on the counter in front of him. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Mark. Only at him. Jackson glanced up, uncertain. His hands didn't move. She cleared her throat. I made a mistake. 3 words. But not the usual kind. Not the kind wrapped in excuses or padded with "but I didn't mean." Just a pause. And then, I was wrong. The room went still. She didn't say it to me. Didn't say it to Mark. She said it to Jackson. I let something inside me, something I was raised with, convince me that blood is the only thing that makes a family. That what's on paper matters more than what's in front of me. But I was wrong. Her voice cracked. You've been nothing but kind to me. You made me a card. You tried. And I made you feel like you didn't belong. Jackson finally spoke. Very quietly. It's okay. But she shook her head. No, sweetheart. It's not okay. And I want to try again. If you'll let me. She slid the box closer to him. He looked at me. I gave him a small nod, lips pressed tight. He peeled back the silver wrapping slowly. Inside, a set of professional watercolor paints. Not the plastic kind. The good kind. The kind that came in little glass jars, lined up like treasure. Beneath them, a thick artist-grade sketchbook. On top, a card. He opened it. Read silently. His lips moved. No one heard the words but him. Then, he looked up. You want me to draw you something? Eloise's eyes welled instantly. I'd like that very much. He nodded. Just a little. Okay. No smile. No hug. No sweeping emotional reunion. Just, okay. But that okay? It was everything. After she left, the room was silent again. But this time, it felt different. Lighter. Less tight. Mark sat down beside me and let out a long, slow breath. You think it'll last? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know. Then he looked at Jackson, who was already flipping through the pages of his new sketchbook. But at least now, she knows the terms. Later that night, we packed. Not because we were angry, but because we needed to leave on our own terms. Jackson had drawn something that afternoon, a little boy standing between 2 tall figures, a man and a woman, holding hands. Behind them, a house. In the sky, a smiling sun. A tiny gray-haired woman stood a little off to the side, arms open, not quite touching the others, but close enough to feel like she might belong there. He titled it, Try Again. When he showed Mark, Mark kissed his forehead. That's exactly what we're doing, buddy. But that wasn't the end. 2 days after we got home, a small envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Just Eloise's handwriting on the front. Inside, a photo. It was old. A snapshot of Mark, maybe 5 years old, holding his mom's hand at the beach, both of them laughing, faces turned toward the camera. On the back, just one sentence. Family is who you fight for. I see that now. Thank you for fighting for him. Mark didn't say anything when he read it. Just stood at the kitchen window for a long time. I didn't interrupt. Because I knew what that moment meant for him, not as a son, but as a father. He had drawn a line. And she finally saw it. Life didn't change overnight. There were no fireworks, no cinematic reunion at an airport, no slow-motion hugs with orchestral swells in the background. What we got instead was this. Small things. Quiet things. The things that matter more than anyone realizes until they're the only things that do. A week after we returned home, Jackson was sitting at the kitchen table with his new watercolor set. He had already filled the first 6 pages of his sketchbook with trees, squirrels, and foxes, his usual favorites. I asked him, casually, "What are you drawing today?" He didn't look up. "A mountain," he mumbled. "But I'm making it look soft. Like, not sharp. Like it's trying not to be scary." I nodded. "That sounds beautiful." He shrugged. "It's for Grandma." I blinked. "Eloise?" He paused. Then, yeah. A week before, I might have flinched at that name. But not now. Now it felt earned. Not in full. Not forever. But enough to try. Later that day, he asked if we could mail it. Not with a message. Not with a note. Just the drawing, folded carefully, slipped into a big envelope. "Do you think she'll know what it means?" he asked. I smiled. "I think she'll try to." 2 days later, we got a reply. No dramatic letter. Just a photo. It was Eloise, sitting in her sunroom, holding the drawing in both hands like it was something precious. Not staged. Not posed. She was crying. And for the first time in my 11 years of knowing that woman, it didn't look like guilt or regret. It looked like understanding. There was a post-it note stuck to the bottom corner of the image. "Tell him the mountain is beautiful. And I'm learning to climb it." It became a rhythm after that. A new kind of relationship, not perfect, but intentional. Cards started arriving in the mail for Jackson. Not just birthday cards with pre-written messages, but handwritten ones. Imperfect. Misspelled. Honest. One of them read, "I watched a video about watercolor painting today. It said to always let the first layer dry before adding more. Maybe that's how people work too." Another simply said, "I saw a fox in the backyard this morning and thought of you. She looked like she owned the world." Jackson didn't reply to every card. Sometimes he just smiled. Sometimes he rolled his eyes. But he never asked us to throw them away. He kept them in a box under his bed, next to his dinosaur. And that told me everything I needed to know. Mark, on the other hand, kept his distance longer. They talked occasionally, usually short calls, short updates. But it wasn't warm. Not yet. And honestly, I respected that. Forgiveness isn't a straight road. Sometimes it loops. Sometimes it stops. Sometimes the best you can do is walk parallel for a while until you feel safe enough to cross back over. Mark was walking parallel. But he wasn't walking away. The following Christmas, we didn't go to Palm Springs. Instead, we stayed home. Just the 3 of us. We wore matching pajamas, made cinnamon rolls from scratch, burned half of them, and opened presents that Jackson had wrapped himself with duct tape and stickers. It was imperfect. And it was perfect. But sometime around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a box. No note. Just a tag that read, "To the one who taught me how to see." Inside? A stuffed fox wearing glasses. A box of Jackson's favorite hot cocoa mix. And a hand-painted ornament, a mountain, with soft, curved edges, and a little boy at the base, looking up. In tiny, shaky handwriting across the bottom, it read, "Keep painting. I'll keep climbing." I showed it to Jackson. He didn't say much. just turned it over in his hand, nodded once, and said, "We can hang it near the back of the tree. Not the front. Not yet." And that was enough. Because what he was offering wasn't a place at the center. It was a second chance to earn one. That night, he added a new drawing to his sketchbook. A little boy. A mom. A dad. A silver-haired woman with a paintbrush in one hand and a hiking stick in the other. At the top of the page, in pencil. Some people don't start out as family. But they can become it. Since then, things have changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But truly. Eloise sends letters now. She asks questions that matter. What does Jackson like about school? What animals is he into this month? Can he send her a list of his favorite paint colors? One time, she even asked for a picture of the two of us so she could paint us. She's trying. We're not handing her medals. But we are handing her time. Time to rebuild. Time to unlearn. Time to become. And she's taking it. That matters. People ask me now, sometimes, did you forgive her? I never know how to answer that cleanly. Because forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a season. And for us, this is spring. The buds are showing. The roots are still shallow. But the sun's out. And the ground is warm. Jackson still carries that card she wrote, the one that said family is who you fight for, folded in his sketchbook. He doesn't read it every day. But he keeps it. And sometimes, when he's drawing in the afternoon light, I catch him glancing at it. Just a glance. Just enough. Because here's the truth. Family isn't about blood. It's about choice. It's about who shows up when it's hardest to. It's about the people who hurt you, but then sit in that hurt with you, and say, I'm staying. It's about little boys who draw pictures of forgiveness before they even know how to spell the word. It's about dads who rewrite the rules to protect their sons. And moms who stop staying silent, even if it means breaking the peace. That Christmas didn't end with applause. It ended with grace. And honestly, that's better. Sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones no one notices. Not the loudest. Not the most eloquent. Not the ones with the titles, or the money, or the seat at the head of the table. But the one who still dares to be kind, after everything. In our case, it was a 9-year-old boy named Jackson. We didn't set out for justice. We weren't trying to make a point. We just wanted our son to feel like he belonged. Like he mattered. Like he wasn't invisible in the family portrait everyone else had already framed without him. But in choosing to act, in choosing to draw a line instead of draw a breath and let it pass, we ended up doing more than just protecting him. We rewrote the rules of what family meant for everyone watching. Because let me tell you this. Justice doesn't always wear a cape. Sometimes it wears dinosaur pajamas and clutches a sketchbook with sticky fingers. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it just whispers okay when someone finally says I was wrong. Justice doesn't slam doors. Sometimes it slides a folded drawing into an envelope, with no words, just a picture of a soft mountain and a little boy at the base. That was Jackson. He didn't yell. He didn't cry in front of them. He didn't retaliate. But he held the line. He taught us that dignity doesn't need volume to be heard. That resilience can look like quietly setting boundaries. And that forgiveness? Forgiveness can be the bravest act of all. I used to think we, as the adults, were the ones teaching him how to navigate the world. How to be strong. How to handle pain with grace. But that Christmas taught me something I didn't expect. It taught me that our son is stronger than we ever gave him credit for. Not because he hid his pain, but because he acknowledged it and still chose love. Let me be clear, he didn't excuse what happened. He didn't forget the sting of being left out. Of being told, in front of everyone, that he wasn't family. But instead of burying that pain, he turned it into something. A drawing. A gift. A space that wasn't fully reopened, but wasn't slammed shut either. He created possibility. And that, to me, is justice. Not a takedown. Not a dramatic confrontation that left the room gasping. But a soft revolution. A quiet one. The kind that plants something deeper than anger. Roots. People ask me, sometimes, what it felt like to watch my son go through that. And I tell them this. It was the moment I stopped believing that adults always know best. Because every adult in that room failed him. Every single one of them chose silence. Every one of them let comfort win over courage. But he didn't. He sat in that silence. He felt it. And instead of letting it break him, he became something else. He became a mirror. And the reflection? It wasn't flattering. Because when a child is more compassionate than the adults who are supposed to guide him, it doesn't just reveal the gap, it exposes the rot. It shows you how much we've normalized casual cruelty in the name of tradition. It shows you how easily we convince ourselves that blood means more than presence, than care, than truth. And it shows you just how little it takes for someone to feel forgotten, and how much it takes to help them feel seen again. But Jackson? He saw himself. And when no one else spoke for him, he didn't disappear. He drew a picture instead. A picture of a family. One that wasn't perfect. One that had gaps. One that had room to grow. But still, a family. And he gave it to the woman who hurt him the most. Not because she earned it, but because he wanted to. That's not weakness. That's not naivety. That's power. The kind of power most people spend their whole lives trying to find through control or wealth or status, only to miss entirely because they never learned how to be soft. Jackson was soft. And he was unbreakable. And here's the thing I'll never forget. When Eloise showed up at our door the next year, she didn't bring a box of money. She didn't come with flowers or some dramatic apology. She came with a photo. A photo of the drawing he'd sent her, framed, sitting on her mantel. And she said, "He gave me more grace than I ever gave him." Then she asked if she could join us for lunch. Not for Christmas. Not for a big family event. Just lunch. A beginning. Jackson looked at me. Then at Mark. And then at her. And he said, "Only if you help me cook. We're making spaghetti. It gets messy." She laughed, actually laughed, and said, "That's fair." They cooked. Together. And I stood at the kitchen doorway watching them stir sauce, wondering how many kids get to teach their elders how to be human. Jackson gave her a second chance. With conditions. With boundaries. But still, a chance. And in doing that, he gave the rest of us something too. Permission. Permission to grow. Permission to try again. Permission to be wrong, and not be banished for it, but be given a map back, even if the road is long. So no. Justice didn't come with slamming doors or final words. It came in the form of a fox in a drawing. Of paintbrushes in the mail. Of quiet invitations to spaghetti. It came in soft mountain edges. In sketchbook pages. And in a little boy who knew that love isn't something you get once, it's something you choose over and over again, especially when it's hardest.